Genevieve Goyano, Senior Programs and Project Officer for MBC. Just a few reminders before we For security reasons, we only sent webinar links to registrants who recognize. For today's event, it is MBC members, democracy advocates, academics, and MBC staff. For transparency, all attendees are required to have their first and last name and their display name. If you are not using a Microsoft account, you can edit your display name as you come into the webinar. Please step out of the meeting room and edit your display name as you come back in. If you are using Microsoft, however, you can edit your display name on the Account Information tab. To avoid noise, kindly mute your microphones once the program starts, unless we invite you to ask your question. To improve our connection, please turn off your cameras, especially after the program has started. Today's session is being recorded as part of Taiwan's Transparency Protocol. It will be uploaded in full. We encourage you to get your questions in early, even while the presentation is going on. We will call you in that order as much as possible. When we call on you for your question, we will turn your microphone on. Please state your name and organization before asking your question. Thank you.
It's 4:30, so we'll start. Good afternoon, everybody. We hope you're safe and well. Welcome to the first session of the Freedom and Democracy series, a partnership between MBC and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Our first guest speaker is Taiwan Digital Minister Audrey Tang, speaking on digital democracy, how technology can enable good government and build trust, contrary to its recent record of disinformation and discord. Before I invite MBC Chairman Edgar Chua for brief opening remarks, I'd just like to check, is Ambassador Su of Vietnam present? Michael Su? He had registered, and we had had a previous event with him, as Victor had mentioned, on Vietnam on Vietnam's COVID-19 response. Also, may I check if Ambassador Peter MacArthur of Canada is here? Ambassador MacArthur?
Not in po.
Not yet. And is Emily here yet? Michelle? Not yet.
Not in also po.
Okay. I'll now call on our chairman, Edgar Chua, for his brief opening remarks. Mr. Chua?
Thank you very much, Coco. Welcome everyone to the 2020 Freedom and Democracy series of MBC in partnership with Germany's Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, or KAS. Welcome to our members and to our new and future allies in this advocacy. We are really honored to partner with KAS on this. While MBC's founders believe that freedom and democracy are essential to improving Philippine lives, KAS has been promoting these ideals around the world for the last 65 years. For most of the histories of MBC and KAS, democracy and freedom has been gaining ground. But starting about a decade ago, they have faced stronger and stronger challenges. And the challenges are fed by many issues, such as wide income and wealth gaps and a perception of weak leadership. We know there is some truth to this criticism, and organizations like ours are committed to making freedom and democracy more democratized. But we also believe that these principles are not just our rights, but still the best way to improve lives around the world. Today's session is about digital democracy. Technology has benefited us in countless ways, but all technologies can and have been abused. Now, technology is being used to attack democracy itself. The technology that enables us to stay connected and make connections, especially during lockdown, is the same technology used by trolls and purveyors of fake news and disinformation. Democrats need to regain the upper hand in technology. And for inspiration, we just need to look straight up to our northern neighbor, Taiwan. This is a country that has used technology to crowdsource legislation, and now to map PPE supplies, and of course, for contact tracing. But while Taiwanese citizens are working together to produce these results, the working together is also breaking down divisions and building trust, essentials for a well-functioning nation. There is a name for this, civic tech. And there is a poster child, our guest today, Digital Minister Audrey Tang. Audrey is actually a quitter. She quit school at 14. Then she made so much money as a self-taught programmer, including advising Apple on Siri, that in 2014, at 33, she quit working for money. By the way, she was paid in Bitcoin. And almost immediately, she joined anti-government protests, including, of course, setting up the Ethernet cables to link demonstrators who occupied a string of government buildings for a month. 2 years later, the protesters were part of the newly elected government, Tang included. Audrey, we are very pleased to welcome you and look forward to your talk and your discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? The sound is getting through? Excellent.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Good.
Excellent.
Good.
Yeah, I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's Digital Minister in charge of social innovation. Really happy to be here. Good local time, everyone. Feel free to start asking questions in the chat room. I have just a very brief, maybe 10-15 minutes slides, after which is entirely crowdsourced. And so let's begin the slides. Can you see my slides? The one that with the Lego block that says digital?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's excellent. Okay. Right. So in Taiwan, democracy itself is a technology. There is a saying that anything that was around when you're born is human nature, and anything that's not around when we're born is technology. And because we only had the first directly elected presidential election in 1996, when I was already 15 years old, to me, democracy definitely is a technology. Like any technology, it can be improved by people. Improve as more people participate. And digital technology, because in Taiwan is the same generation that work with the World Web as the people who work on democracy, we think that digital technology remains one of the best ways to improve participation, as long as the focus is on finding common ground and creating what we in the internet governance call rough consensus instead of division, like antisocial social media. And so how to make social media pro-social? That really is the question that I set out to answer when I quit junior high school back in 1996. And I'm really happy to be here to share with you what we have learned and how Taiwan successfully countered the coronavirus using the power of digital democracy and social innovation. And it can be broadly described in 3 pillars. That's fast, fair, and fun. The fast part. Whereas many jurisdictions began counter coronavirus only this year, Taiwan started last year. Last December, when Dr. Li Wenliang, the PRC whistleblower, posted on social media there that there were 7 new SARS cases on the Huanan seafood market, he would get inquiries, eventually punishments from his local police institutions, but literally at the same hour, the Taiwan equivalent of Reddit, the PTT board, which is not-for-profit National Taiwan University operated internet forum, has somebody with this name Nomer Pipe reposting Dr. Li Wenliang's whistleblowing. And our medical officer immediately noticed this upvote post and issued an order saying that all passengers flying in from Wuhan to Taiwan the very next day need to start health inspections the first day of 2020. So this says to me 2 things. First, that the civil society is operating in a sufficient free environment to talk about possible new SARS cases in a public forum, and that the government trusts the citizens enough to take it very seriously and treat it as if SARS happened again, something we've always been preparing since 2003, SARS 1.0. And because of this open civil society, according to the Civicus Monitor, Taiwan is the most open society in the whole of Asia. And if you count Asia Pacific, one of the only 2, along with New Zealand. We enjoy the same freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, of the press, and so on, as other liberal democratic countries, but with the emphasis on keeping an open mind to novel ideas from the society, from social innovators, because our democracy is so young. And that is also why our schools and businesses remains open. We've been countering the pandemic with no lockdown and countering the infodemic with no takedown. And one of the collective intelligence input is as simple as a toll-free number, the 1922. Anyone can pick up the phone and call 1922 and gets all their questions answered about the Central Epidemic Command Center. And the CECC holds a press conference every day during the pandemic, which was live streamed and with the journalists asking all they want. And because of this, whenever there's any new idea coming in from the civil society, it gets amplified to the entire country very quickly. For example, I still remember there was one day in April when a young boy and their family called 1822 saying, my boy doesn't want to go to school because when we ration medical mask, you don't get to pick the color, and all they had was pink medical mask. And the young boy said, oh, my classmates will look at me funny and I don't want to go to school, whatever. And because of that, the very next day, everybody in the CECC press conference, including our minister, Chen Shizhong, wear pink medical mask, making sure that everybody learns about gender mainstreaming, which is also such an innovation. I think Minister Chen even said that his childhood role model was Pink Panther or something. And this kind of fast response not only builds trust between the government and civil society, but also ensure that a boy can proudly go to school because only he has the color that the heroes wear. And so that is not only fast, but also fun. But before I get to the fun part, I need also to cover fairness. For example, when we ramped up the facial mask production, making sure everybody can use their national health insurance card, which covers more than 99.99% of residents and citizens from the pharmacies. Fairness is the guiding principle. But the actual visualization is not done by the government, but rather by the civic technologists, the GovZero movement. G0V is an online space where anybody can participate to remake the government in their own vision, in their own image. So for each government website that people don't like join.gov.tw, and they can just change the O to a 0, and then get into the shadow government, which offers the same features, the same data, but always in an interactive way, and that's more engaging. And also they relinquish all the copyright, so the government can at any given time just take the GovZero, fork the government, important pronunciation, forked version, and then turn it back into government service, a process that we name it as reverse procurement. And so one example is that when we first started rationing the medical mask, there was this civic technologist with the name Howard Wu from Tainan who coded up this map where anybody can report where it has mask in stock and where it runs out of the mask. And so we immediately noticed this, and I talked to the premier, to the National Health Insurance Agency, saying that we really need to trust citizens with open data. So not only do we publish the stock level of all the pharmacies' mask stock, but we actually publish it at a time every 30 seconds. So for example, this particular pharmacy has 58 adult masks and 196 children's masks. And that's why GovZero and many community contributors built more than 140 tools that enable people to use whatever way they want. People who prefer map can view a map. People with blindness can hear from voice assistants, chatbots, and so on. All of them can get the same inclusive access about information about which pharmacists near them still have the mask. And people queuing in line keep each other and the system honest. If you queue in line and get 9 medical masks as an adult from the pharmacy, people queuing after you will expect this number become 49 after you finish the purchase. If after a few minutes they refresh and rather see the number stay unchanged, or if the number jumps to 67 or something, they will call 1922 right there. And so that's participatory accountability. And so this is how we make sure that people who show any symptom will then be able to take medical mask, go to a local clinic, knowing that they will get treated fairly without incurring any financial burden. And this also enables civic technologists to make dashboards that lets people see actually our supply is indeed growing, and also that whenever there is an oversupply or undersupply or coordination needed with the pharmacists on any rural, remote, offshore island areas, we can co-create a distribution strategy with the entire society. And so based on this analysis, as you can see, this is our premier, by the way, smiling happily here, because the analysis showed that there are people who work very long hours. If they finish work and all the pharmacists ends work, and when we ration only through pharmacies, those people who work very long hours, like in science parks and so on, they could miss the mask collection simply because they work too late in the day. And so we said, okay, we have to start working with convenience stores. So 7-Eleven, Family Mart, High Life, and OK Mart Altogether, they have more than 12,000 convenience stores in a country with just 23 million people. And so that ensure that there's even more, like twice as more compared to pharmacies that opens 24 hours a day, that you can take the same NHI card to go there and pre-order and collect your mask anytime. So we ensure fairness of all kinds. And finally, I would like to stress, but because this is a stressful time, people do feel anxious. There's a lot of panic buying and conspiracy theories. And in Taiwan, we have already established a counter disinformation strategy that counters the infodemic with no takedown. And it's called humor over rumor. So for example, when there was a panic buying of tissue papers, there was a rumor that says, quote, because we're ramping up the mass production from 2 million a day to 20 million a day, it's the same material as tissue papers. So we'll run out of tissue paper soon, unquote. That's not true, by the way. In Taiwan, disinformation is defined as intentional untruths that causes public harm, and that's disinformation. And so the same premier smiling in the previous slide now shows in this internet meme wrote just a couple hours, not even 2 hours, after the panic buying starts. He says, and in very large print, wiggling his button a little bit, he says in very large print, each of us only have one pair of buttocks. And this is a wordplay because bottom, twin, sounds the same as stockpile in Mandarin, twin. And so basically it's saying that there's no point in stockpiling tissue papers. And then it says in this table, the tissue paper are made out of South American materials, whereas PP, the medical mask material, came from domestic sources. So one doesn't affect the other. And so this went absolutely viral. And because of that, the panic buying message, which travels on outrage, maybe only have an R value of 3, like every hour, each person spread to 3 other people. But this meme has a R value of 5 or more, meaning that people will share to 5 or 7 friends every hour. And so this went viral, and the conspiracy theory just died down within a day or two. And finally, we found out that people who spread the rumor in the first place was tissue paper resellers, and they were persecuted. But in any case, this is not just a single shot. This is literally every single CECC daily press conference that introduced new measures gets translated by the spokesdog or 总裁, a Shiba Inu dog of the Ministry of Health and Welfare. Because you see, in each ministry, we have parliamentary officer that talk to MPs, press officer that talk to journalists, and we have participation officers that talk to hashtags. And so these hashtag officers are very creative, like professional comedian teams. And so the health and welfare participation officer lives with the dog. And so they just go back home, take a picture of the dog, and roll out an internet meme that says, if you're indoor, please keep 3 dogs away from one another. If you're outdoor, please keep 2 总裁 away from one another. Or if you're sneezing, please cover your mouth and nose. Don't do what this dog do. And remember to pre-order your mask. And why? Why wear a mask? Because a mask protect you from your own unwashed hands. Use a soap. And so, like, don't do this. A mask prevents you from doing this. And so that's how we make sure that those clarification, those science ideas travels faster than fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's how we make sure that Taiwanese people still feel calm and collected, even during the pandemic. So that's my contribution, my opening slides. Feel free to read more at taiwancanhelp.us.
Thanks very much, Audrey. And thank you for that humorous presentation. We're going to go to Q&A now, which my colleague Genevieve will assist me with. Please type in your questions in the chat box and we'll call on you more or less in that order. But first, Audrey, allow me to call on one of our trustees whom you've already met, Victor Paterno, for a comment or a question, Victor. Victor is CEO of 7-Eleven Philippines, which is controlled by Taiwan's President Chain Store Corporation. And Audrey did not know that Victor was going to be here, so the mention of 7-Eleven earlier was not planned. Victor?
Thank you. Great presentation, Audrey. Makes me want to move there. Is some of the stuff you've built open source so that we can, use it here?
Yes, the entire mask map is open source. as is the portal that I host this distribution. And so, yeah, feel free to look into our GitHub. This is just a portal. And then you can also see each and every contributors like visualization chatbots and things like that. And I think the primary one, the pharmacy map, the heat map, and things like that were all open source under the very liberal MIT license, or CC0, that's public domain.
Okay, I mean, without really knowing what the Philippines is like, I'm not sure if you've been to the Philippines, but any piece of software you'd recommend that we use?
Yeah,
tracing
right.
is the most difficult for us.
Right, just a month after we roll out the mask map thing, the South Korean civic technologists convinced their government that if Taiwan can do it, certainly South Korea can do. And so, and that's when they actually started mask rationing through the pharmacies using actually exactly the same app as the one that's developed in Tainan. And so the first map that went live on South Korea was actually written by a Taiwanese, Finjan Kyang, and even though he didn't speak Korean, he spoke JavaScript, and that's what matters. And I also personally contributed to the Stop COVID dashboard, which is a code for Japan. That's Japanese equivalent of the Tokyo metropolitan area as the GovZero here. And so the Stop COVID now has various translations, and I contributed personally on the Taiwanese Mandarin translation. You can take a look here. Again, this is on GitHub, and I think many municipalities have forked this so that they can provide a single shot kind of visualization of pretty much everything related to COVID to the residents in multiple languages.
Thank you. Thank you.
Genevieve, who's the next?
Hi, thanks, Coco. Let's invite the head of the Asia to raise question to the group. Sam.
Sam, that's you. Sam is the head of the Asia Foundation. Sam, you have a question?
Thanks, Coco. Thanks, Audrey. Super interesting. You used the characterization of fast, fun, fair, which was catchy. Is that something that defines your digital governance approach more broadly, or is something specific that you developed for COVID, or is it just your kind of the way you frame your thinking around these responses?
Oh, excellent question. No, the whole digitalization process is abbreviated as DG, D-I-G-I, and that's digitization, innovation, governance, and inclusion. And the fast, fair, fun, fair part is just the innovation pillar of it. I have other catchy tunes for the digitization and governance and inclusion parts.
It's nice to think that it's nice to think that digital governance can be fun and done with a sense of humor, right? We seem to be lacking that part of it in the Philippines.
Well, I think when the prime minister makes fun of himself in a like totally non-offensive way, that really makes everybody calm and more into a deliberative mood. And fun and humor really, in our experience, without issuing any takedowns, that's really the only emotion that travels faster than outrage.
We should test that, Sam, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we should.
I guess in many places, and sometimes here in the Philippines, the atmosphere is a bit toxic. So we need to test this theory that the R of humor is faster than some of these other things.
Cute dogs can help, toxic. But in our experience, cute cats works even better than cute dogs. Yeah.
Is that quantified?
It is actually quantified. MIT Media Lab has a paper about it. Yeah.
Did this philosophy of using humor, did that precede you? Is that something that came with you or this government, or earlier?
Yeah, I think so. I always said that without a takedown, we need to be fast, fair, and fun. But this particular brand of humor came with our Prime Minister, Su Zhen-Chang. And I will share another example, which is one of his early work and after becoming the Prime Minister. And as you can see here, like early when he became the Prime Minister, there was a popular rumor that says perming your hair will be subject to a $1 million fine if you perm twice a week. And of course, people this information travels on outrage. Well, just misinformation because it wasn't intentional. And so within a couple of hours, the Prime Minister rolls out this, which is this is a hair salon symbol and with some scissors. And that says, there's a rumor that says perming your hair twice a week will be fined $1 million. That's not true. Even though I'm bald now, I would not punish people who look like my youth because he used to have hair, you see. And then a small print that says, what we've actually done is introducing labeling requirement for hair products starting 2021. And then the premier, as he now looks, says next to a hair dryer, however, if you perm your hair many times a week, it would not damage your pocket, but it would damage your hair. Just look at me at what happened to you. Anyway, so this is, again, very good humor because it's making fun of himself, not anybody else. And that particular brand of humor we have discovered in an empirical, quantified fashion that has the highest R value than any other kind of fun making.
Sam, if you turn on your video, we can show whether or not this last example applies to us, right, Sam?
Yeah, we could.
Genevieve, who's the next question?
Yes, our next question is from Paterno. Mr. Vic, can you elaborate more on your question? Mr. Paterno?
Sorry, I don't mean to hug the mic. I was just really curious. Is there anybody else who yeah, I was. You talked about consultation, consultative, and I mean more of COVID, no? But could you? How do you do that without running into trolls? Would you use? How do you control for identity? Related to that, do you see blockchain voting happen in the future?
Yeah, troll control, my favorite topic. So yes, and our consultation platform joined the gov.tw, which registers more than 10 million people, unique visitors, not visits. In a country with 23 million people, so half of population. So we don't call it the e-participation platform anymore, we just call it the participation platform. And it just uses simple things like SMS for authentication. And the way that we do troll control is via this AI-powered consultation platform called Polis. And as you can see here, Polis is spelled POL.is. And this is the first conversation we had in Polis in 2015, deliberating about UberX. At the time, Uber was operating in Taiwan with people who don't have professional driver licenses and ostensibly just car sharing, but they car share like 30 times a day. But in any case, there's some tension as of whether this is sharing economy or things like that. So we started a consultation where people can see their friends and families' avatar and the clusters of opinions and feelings. And the point here is that when you do consultation using Polis, there is no reply button. There's just some shared objective facts. And then for 3 or 4 weeks, we start asking people, how do you feel about it? And you can feel happy, they can feel angry, whatever. There's no right or wrong about feelings. And that's what's often missing from the consultation process. And only when the feelings start resonating with each other do we start ideation. And the best idea are the one that resonate with the most people's feelings. And then we ratify those good ideas. And so the user interface is this. You can see one sentiment from your fellow citizen, like this one is from me. I feel that passenger liability insurance when I'm in the passenger seat is very important. Now, if you agree, your avatar will move toward me. If you disagree, you will move farther from me. And then you will see another sentiment and you will agree or disagree again and again. And after a while, you can share your own feelings for other people to vote on. And so this clustering is just K-means clustering. This 2-dimension is just principal component analysis. So just very simple AI stuff. And so this assistive intelligence makes sure that trolls have no room to play. Like there's no reply button. So you cannot attack me even if you disagree with me. And even if you get like 30 people all voting the same, they're just one dot here, right? It doesn't increase the area because the area measures the plurality. And so at each and every consultation, we actually only hold ourselves to account to the agenda that's set by the consensus statement. That is to say people agree regardless of which group they are in. And we completely acknowledge and ignore the divisive statements, which tend to be ideological. Like, I think Uber is sharing economy. I think Uber is not. I mean, you can't act on these feelings. And so we just ignore these. And so insurance, registration, and taxation, whatever, things that people do care about, we then ideate in a live stream multi-stakeholder consultation. And so this is maybe the most important point to make, in that in a democracy, even though social media and institutional media more and more only highlights the divisive points, there are still a lot of points that people broadly agree on with most of their neighbors. And we can surface those common feelings. People feel they are in a polity again. And like this one is the one we actually run in Bowling Green, Kentucky in the USA. There's many people grouped and votes were cast. And regardless of whether they identify as Democrats or Republican, everybody agreed that in the current K-12 education, science, technology, engineering, and math need to have an art component in it because they're all creative. And this costs almost nothing. But this wasn't on the agenda of the township or the mayorship because it wasn't cool. It doesn't sell advertisements. And so people don't discover that this is actually something they truly want. And if the mayor just take this into account, their chance of re-election just go up by 0.1% or something. This is the lower hanging fruit, politically speaking. And so this kind of consultation that is more inclusive builds a policy over time. And so for distributed ledger, again, something participatory is always good. I already shared the mask map and how people queuing in line can keep each other honest. And we can build this so quickly because the civil society already have a similar map called the airbox map. And the airbox, each number here is the level of PM 2.5 air quality as produced by a data steward, maybe in a primary school, maybe in people's balcony. Each device costs less than $100. And so a lot of people just build this distributed ledger that shows the real-time air quality. And because their number is so many, more than the environment ministry, they then start to negotiate with the environment minister saying, okay, we will allow the National Center for High-Speed Computation to start using our numbers for air modeling, but and also we agree to have our devices measured and calibrated for humidity or whatever by the national agencies. But in return, we require you to go to the SCOPs, that is the science parks. We suspect them of polluting the air, but we cannot break and enter and install airboxes. But it turns out the municipal governments own the lab in those industrial parks. So we can take their design, again, reverse procurement, and install it in the industrial parks, making sure that we can share this through open innovation like open hardware and open software with everybody around the world. And distributed ledger technology ensures that even with the supercomputing power, like top 20 in the world of the National Center of High-Speed Computation, we cannot go back in time and change the civil society's numbers. So it's a very easy technology to get people some trust, accountability across different sectors. And so we use it for voting also, but for voting on things, not or on budget, but not voting on people. Because voting on people in Taiwan, we already have a very radically transparent process where people will just take out the ballots from their ballot boxes, and the YouTubers will actually film the counting process using this civil society civic tech app to tally the numbers as it's being counted. It's actually very difficult to design a e-counting system that's as transparent as this paper-based one. And so it's facing some difficulty for us to invent a process backed by crypto that can have the same social ceremony effect as the public counting process. But for referenda, for presidential hackathon, for participatory budget, there's a lot more room to do e-collecting and then eventually e-tallying.
Thank you. That was really good. I would point out for the Filipinos, I think it starts with the SIM card. Our SIM cards here are 95% prepaid, all of which are anonymous. There is an initiative to register, to KYC the SIM cards at some point within the next 1 or 2 years. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Our next question, I think this is related to the humor over rumor that you mentioned a while ago. So may we invite Mr. Jason Gonzalez to pose his question for the group?
Hello, Audrey. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi,
my
Jason.
video. Hello.
Please introduce yourself, Jason. I know you.
Hello, I'm Jason Gonzalez. I'm with the Liberal Party in the Philippines. Um, my question concerns the infodemic that you're talking about. It's a nice word. What are the most common forms, Audrey, of disinformation that are being inflicted on Taiwan coming from overseas? Who are its most common targets in terms of people and personalities and institutions, and how do you combat disinformation coming from abroad?
Yes, excellent question. So, and I happen to have some slides. So, according to the collaborative fact-checking community, COFACTS, which is like flagging an email as spam, on the end-to-end encrypted channel line, you can also flag something as disinformation and forward it to the GovZero project COFACTS. Or in the economic sector, there's the antivirus company Trend Micro that also delivers doctor message. And both if soon as you forward it, send it to the fact checkers in the international fact checking network to fact check. And so according to them, the most trending ones are around, well, food safety and like perming your hair and things like that, notwithstanding, because these are hardly intentional. Most of them are just misinformation. The intentional ones often concerns the democratic process itself, trying to make people to distrust the democratic process, for example, elections. For example, there was one disinformation making the rounds just during our presidential election, saying that the CIA, and I quote, made 2 special invisible ink for ballots. So no matter who you vote, the place for Tsai will appear, and the vote for other 2 candidates will disappear, unquote. Very imaginative. And however, because we started this YouTuber campaign from all the different parties to literally take out the ballots and show it to the YouTubers, that conspiracy theory really has no room to play because people can see with their own eyes that the inks are not invisible at all. And so that's the kind of thing we're looking at. And for example, there was another one right before the presidential election that says, and I quote, Hong Kong thugs compensation exposed, killing a police, earning you up to 20 million, unquote. Now, what has Hong Kong to do with Taiwan? Well, it turns out that the main issue in the Taiwanese presidential election was the anti-ELAB protest. The people who supported Dr. Tsai Ing-wen supported her stance of supporting the anti-ELAB as a democratic demonstration. And the people who were against Dr. Tsai Ing-wen often painted the Hong Kong people as riotous. And so that was the issue, the divisive issue. And so the rumor making the rounds in the Taiwanese social media says, and I quote, the 13-year-old thug bought new iPhones and he is recruiting his brothers, unquote. And that's the kind of thing that you see that is intentional. And then according to the fact checkers, it actually came from Reuters. It was a Reuters photo, like a genuine photo from the anti-ELAB. But the Reuters caption says nothing about iPhones or being paid. It's just that there were teenage protesters. So what did we do? Instead of taking it down, we did a notice and public notice. We work with the social media companies such as Facebook, so they're required to put in a warning, a frame here around this particular piece of disinformation, saying that according to the fact checkers, this is sponsored by 中央政法委长安健, the Weibo account of the Central Political and Law Council of the Central Communist Party of the PRC, of the People's Republic of China regime. And so, and that's true. I mean, it's still there in their Weibo. That's literally overt, it's not covert. So it's basically state propaganda, not to mention copyright violation. And so what we did is just to make sure that people learn about the attribution and that they can participate in the fact checking and the attribution. And that's the important part, because once people become competent as a media producer, instead of just a consumer, we don't talk about media literacy, we talk about media competence. They can then share this attribution skill to other people as well.
Thank you, Audrey. Just a quick follow-up question. It's a question of reach because in the Philippines, fact-checking can only go so far. So when you respond to a deliberate disinformation attack and your response doesn't get the kind of traction that they're able to do, are there any interventions in that direction? Like, for example, when you're faced with a massive troll army, how do you deal with something like that? So the question here concerns reach, because again, fact checking can only go so far.
Well, if the fact checking is notice and public notice, you can actually go back in time. All right. So for everybody who shared that piece of disinformation on the social media, retroactively, the IFCN, the International Fact Check Network, can then label these things as disinformation, and it stops showing on people's newsfeed. It's just like each incoming spam goes into the junk mail box. That we wouldn't check unless we have too much time. I don't. And so because of that, some algorithmic co-governance with the large social media institutions is necessary. And even before, for example, Line, which is a very popular end-to-end encrypted channel here, work on their own dashboard. The GovZero community work on the Kofax, which, as I said, enabled people to look at the trending rumors. And because it's open source, the Thai people, after we share with them in the Chulalongkorn University, simply built kofax.org, which is the Thai version of the same thing. And once people get into the habit of just inviting, like the Dr. Message bot from the Trend Micro into their chat rooms, it will, just like an antivirus, well, it's also a cute dog. There's something about cute dogs. And if people share in a local group, like this group was 252 people, anything that looks like disinformation or scam or whatever, this bot will scan each incoming message, and they will put out a sticker that says no within a second if it's already fact checked, and then says that woof, this is danger because this is not true, and if you click the link, you will actually get cybersecurity problems or whatever. And so this is the kind of real-time response we're looking at, basically going back to where the disinformation are and building this awareness that there are intentional public harm messages being spread and get people into the mood of being the fact checker themselves instead of relying only on a handful of professional fact checkers. That's the most important part. We also teach that in K-12 curriculum.
Again, thank you.
So our next three questions, so there are a lot. They're all on collaboration. So may we invite Ron host to pose the first question on collaboration?
Weird. Just a second. Okay, your sound is back. Sorry.
Okay. Ron?
Sure. So first, thank you for the great presentation. This is, very inspiring. So I guess listening to you speak beyond the use of technology, I think what I find very exciting about the Taiwanese model you're describing is just the manner in which you've been able to harness collective initiative and group consensus to improve governance and inclusion and plurality, right? So I guess living in the Philippines and especially through this COVID crisis, we see a lot of people that actually have initiative and abilities. Working on building projects, but actually finding it very hard to kind of have their ideas and solutions like surface up or connecting with government in a way in which those things can actually, deploy and make their way to, out to the general public. And so I guess my question is, what do you think contributed to inspiring the Taiwanese government to open up in this way to collaborate with non-government and technology initiatives? And what lessons do you think we can learn from this?
Yeah, I think the career public service, the bureaucracy, is really important here. When we occupied the parliament in the Sunflower Movement, we didn't know that there's many career public service that was in the crowd that also were in the occupied parliament because, they were looking just like any other people. But they learned from the occupiers looking at the demonstration, not just as a protest, but as a demo, as a way to show that it is possible to get 500,000 people on the street and many more online into this consensual mood that provides a deliberative space for the 20 or so NGOs, each talking about one aspect of the cross-strait service and trade agreement with Beijing at the time. One NGO talked about, for example, that there were no so-called private sector companies in the PRC because when the state went down, when the party wants, they can always, through their party branches, switch the leadership in any so-called private sector companies. And so back then we were doing our 4G infrastructure, and the consensus on the street was that we need to ban any PRC components building a clean path. I'm happy to see other countries now joining. And so that was 6 years ago. And what we didn't know was that in the people who deliberated, there were people from the National Security Council, there were people from the National Communication Commission, and they were there as citizens concerned about this very thing as career public service. And they would then bring the consensus back to their council and eventually agreed to what people agreed on the street, that there really wasn't any private sector companies in the telecom, in the PRC space. And so the point here is that the career public service is not the demonstrators' enemy. And as the digital minister, half of my office is from the secondments sent from the various ministries, and they're the most innovative bunch. All they need is for me to absorb the risk. Like this, if their ideas go wrong, it's always Audrey's fault. And their innovations can save each other time. And that's why we can see things like reverse procurement, which is civic tech ideas being adopted by career public service. That's why we can see reverse mentorship. That's to say the career public service identify the younger than 35 social innovators, which they recommend their minister, the appointed politicians, to work with on a day-to-day basis. I was myself a reverse mentor in 2014 and 15, like a intern promoted to a full minister, if you will. And these reverse procurement, reverse internship, reverse mentorship, and things like that were all career public servant ideas. And so work with the bureaucracy, not against it, would be my main advice.
Ron, do you have any other follow-up questions? By the way, Audrey, Ron is the founder of an e-wallet here in the Philippines, coins.ph. Ron, do you want to add something? Or you're good? Okay. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, thank you. That was actually very, that was right on point. And I think, kind of the resonating point is, working together with government, right? So.
Okay, right. So from the ideas that inspired this collaborative culture in the Taiwanese society, we can now go to the practical side. So I will now call on Sam to pose the follow-up question on Ron's question earlier. Sam?
Yeah, so that was fascinating in terms of how the government works internally and how you're able to mobilize. I think there's some real things that we can pick up on there. We have a recently created Department of Information Communication Technology, which is still, I think, trying to establish itself and is mostly focused on telecommunications, but could be a vehicle for a lot of that intergovernment learning and collaboration as you describe, which would be great. The other part of that is private sector, and how does the government incentivize the private sector to work with them effectively, and internally incentivize the national departments to engage with private sector in a collaborative way? Ideas and lessons on that.
Excellent question. So to the private sector innovators, you get to break the law and write your own law. And that's the sandbox mechanism. And literally, people clamored for a better KYC than going into a physical bank counter. And it turns out that a lot of people who are very young in Taiwan, who doesn't have financial access otherwise, do have a registered SIM card. And they did go through the KYC when registering for the SIM card. And they pay their telecom bills quite often. So even if they're just 18 or 19 years old, they have pretty good credit if you look at their mobile phone payment bills. And so there was a sandbox idea from the private sector saying, okay, so we should just open a virtual bank account from the KYC that was established by the SIM card, and we should just start handing out credit based on their mobile payment history, which is again, against the regulation, at least, because there was no way to calculate the risk involved back then. But because of the sandbox mechanism, the private sector can just go ahead and do it and break the law and regulation, any ministry's regulation, for 6 months. as long as, of course, that you do not break the two laws that are the red line. You cannot experiment on funding terrorism, and you cannot experiment on money laundering, because we know what will happen. So no need to experiment. But anything else is fair game. And so that ensure a open knowledge sharing. Like by the end of half a year, people will know then the cybersecurity parameter, the risk parameter, how the algorithm would be held accountable and things like that. And either, it doesn't work, like people really hate the idea. And in which case we thank the investors, right? It's like reverse lottery. You lost a lot, everybody learned a little. Or you hit a jackpot and it's a really good idea. And then you have the first mover advantage while the parliament legalized your idea. And you can continue operating as a de facto monopoly because everybody else was illegal. But on the other hand, when the parliament finishes with it, of course, you will have a real competitor. But it's still a very large first mover advantage. And every year, we hold this presidential hackathon. As long as your technology works to further any sustainable development goal, you can enter this hackathon, which is 3 months, stretching what hackathon actually means. And then at the end of it, 5 teams will win the trophy. And the trophy is the shape of Taiwan with a micro projector underneath. And if you turn it on, it projects Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, our president, handing the trophy to you, which is a meta trophy. It describes itself. And then the presidential promise is whatever you tried in the past 3 months, even though it may break any number of laws, we will make it into reality, into national policy in the next 12 months. So that's presidential power as hackathon prize. And that also incentivizes the public servants to come up with novel ideas and seek private sector partners because it saves their time and reduce the political risk if it's the private sector trying it out for 3 months. If it doesn't work, they can say, oh, we just participate in the hackathon. But if it does work, then of course their career really changed for the better.
Sam, is everything good on your end? Okay.
My
So
colleague,
our next.
my Geneva and my other colleagues are telling me to tell the audience it's not scripted. Whenever a questioner comes up, Audrey seems to have exactly the right graphic to show. It's just it's such a pleasure to work to be doing this video conference with somebody so adept.
Right. This is not a recording. Yeah.
This is not scripted. Geneva, next one, and we'll test based on the next question whether Audrey has the right slide again.
Yeah, I think our next question hints on more on the Philippine experience, I think. So, Mr. Paco Pangalangan, if you can just expound more on your question for Audrey. Paco?
Right, thank you. Hi, can you hear me?
Could you tell everybody who you represent here? I mean, we introduced you earlier,
Sure
but maybe some weren't here yet.
Sure thing. Yeah, no, I'm Paco Pangalangan. I'm with Strat-based ADR Institute. We're a think tank based here in Manila, and we cover topics from the South China Sea, like Coco mentioned earlier, to issues like democracy, energy and environment, all these things. We're very active, and the pandemic hasn't stopped us from pushing. But yeah, that said, I was really inspired by a lot of the things that you said and how much your government really, embraces technology and innovation and this collaborative spirit with both civil society and the private sector. And so that led me to this question, which kind of is related to the couple of questions that came ahead of me. But it actually is, it's related to digital inclusion. I don't know if you've seen in the news, the Philippines, the relationship of our government is a bit more combative maybe when it comes to working with the private sector and especially those in telecommunication space. But still though, digital inclusion is important, all the more important now. And I just wanted to know what has your government done to connect the last mile, to ensure that everybody can participate and reap the benefits of this, of technology. So that's it.
Okay, great question. And I do have a slide for that.
Wow.
Magic.
About this. You do.
I actually do. This is our indigenous nation elder translator, a cultural translator. And because in Taiwan, we have more than 20 national languages, the majority of which indigenous. The inclusion is really important to all of us. And what we do is that we make sure that broadband is a human right. Even on the top of Taiwan, the Savia, the Jade Mountain, or Pentugunung, depending on which indigenous language you speak, is almost 4,000 meters high. But anywhere in Taiwan, you're guaranteed to have 10 megabits per second at no additional price, like it's unlimited plan for just $16 a month. And if you don't, it's my fault, personally. And so that was President Tsai Ing-wen's campaign promise 4 years ago, and we delivered on it. And because of that, we made sure that people have this bidirectional relationship with democracy. It's not just like television and radio where they download a lot, but the upload link is just a toll-free number. Anyone can start a live streaming. Anyone can be a YouTuber. And most importantly, when I tour around Taiwan, I would go specifically to the place that's least connected to the Taipei city, the capital, and just go where the people are, empowering people who are closest to the pain, and listen to the elders, both the elderly and the indigenous elders, in their place, in their own language. And I'll spend half a day, an entire day, or just a couple nights in an ethnographic hangout with people, and making sure that I can understand what pains them and what innovations do they bring. But I don't travel by myself, or rather I do travel by myself. I travel by myself and a high-speed camera, so that people in the Social Innovation Lab, which is here, literally I'm video conferencing from here, can just look at what I look at in the rural and indigenous places. And you can see public servants from 12 ministries in the same room, in different municipalities, all connected to this town hall from the indigenous lands or the remote and rural lands. And whatever they say will be listened fully and intently by all the ministries. So instead of by abstractions like PowerPoint slides or Word documents, we make sure that people listen to the whole story and can brainstorm right there with the people, after the people, not just for the people. And because the Social Innovation Lab itself is a park, we tore down all the walls. Anyone can just walk in. And every Wednesday, anyone can have 40 minutes of my time, just chatting, whatever. The only thing I ask is, like our tour, social innovation tours, we make sure that everything that we say is published online, either as a recording on YouTube or as a transcript in the Say It system that we built. And so the Say It system, which track then, like after I become digital minister, I talked to 5,000 people on over 1,000 occasions, on over like almost 300,000 speeches. And so people understand the why of policymaking, not just the what of policy, because things at the drafting stage are tracked here. And as we start to tour, we start to see that common innovations are everywhere in Taiwan, so that we can actually see a map. And in this map, we will then look at the different counties and so on, and the social innovation groups that they have, the common sustainable development goals that they have, or if they're in a municipality where they do their voluntary national and local reviews, we can also collaborate on those reviews so that we see those themes, for example, on reducing the plastics and marine waste, which is very important, and so on. And then we start finding the commonalities between the local innovations and how the national innovation system can work to further those sustainable development goals. So it's an entire system that basically makes sure that if you're a elder from an indigenous village, all you do is to go to your town hall regularly as usual and speak your mind. But what you say will be amplified to the entire society, and that's how we do inclusion.
Paco, is there anything you want to take away from what Audrey said that we can apply here? Or are you good with your question?
Well, no. Well, it was good. I just wanted to note, yeah, that I think you also raised you've been raising it really, that the role of technology in increasing transparency and accountability. And if anything, I do have like a follow-up question, a bit, an unrelated follow-up question about like where you store all of this data. You do a lot of big data analytics, clearly, and how could you tell us like a bit more of how the government handles this sort of data? Is it on government servers or somewhere else maybe?
Yeah. So, but sorry, are you talking about data storage or so like the collection or processing or storage or application? Like which phase of the data pipeline are you talking about?
Right. I was referring to storage at the beginning, but you're free to discuss any part along the pipeline that you think is applicable.
Okay, okay. Well, I have a slide for that as well. So what we do is collaboratives. And just one example, I share about the air quality. And as you can see, the collection starts from the social sector, backed by the economic sector that collects those air boxes. And then when they need the air boxes on, the industrial areas, then we start asking the municipalities to collect it. And then it's sent into this national center of high-speed computation, which there's a lot of like below market costs, certainly cheaper than AWS or Azure GPUs, where any junior high schooler can start uploading their models and algorithms in an open algorithm way, so that the NCHC will then process those models for climate research or really for warning people that there may be overheating, drink plenty of water and things like that. And so it aggregates all sorts of different data, including air quality, disaster prevention, that's earthquake and flood, and water quality and water levels and things like that into this computing environment. So that's centralized, that's National Center of High-Speed Computation. But then it offers free mirrors. So you can also mirror it into your own value-added services if you're in the private sector. And if you're just wanting to keep it accountable, it also gets snapshots at this place in distributed ledger technology, so that you can rest assured that we cannot modify your data. Not like we would, but we wouldn't. And then if it's related to personal identifiable information, of course, then this shape is basically about open algorithm, where the people still keep their own data and they write into the distributed ledger only the attestation, like the zero knowledge range proof and other proofs about it. Or because the NCHC is so powerful, they can even run fully homomorphic encryption on the NCHC instances, doing privacy preserving or even privacy enhancing calculation by the industrial models. And again, this then gets into the data supply, which is just sharing the wisdom of the learned, like the only the two output layers in a federated learning scheme, or for fully homomorphic encryption, just the insight gleaned from that query, not the raw data itself. And that gets republished then as a data supply, and also for value-added services. And so it's a quite sophisticated model that we first prototype using only the data that doesn't have privacy inclinations, and that's why we started with the air and water and river and things like that. But now we're gradually moving it also toward the personal health information using ZK and other PETs.
Okay, that's quite a lot. To the rest of the
Thank you.
participants,
Thank you.
let's test how many slide decks Audrey has, and we encourage you to ask your questions in the chat box. But for the next question, we will head first to Mr. Elmer. And Audrey, Elmer's company manufactures air quality machines. Mr. La Peña, can we ask you to say your question for Audrey?
Yes. Elmer, could I interrupt you for a while? I think we have a participant under the name of Han. I think we actually know who it is, but if you are Han, could you type in your full name so we can identify you more properly? Thank you very much. Elmer, go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. Hi, Audrey. Really entertaining. So, I think I'm having a lot of fun just watching your presentation and listening to your responses. And I don't know if this is okay to ask here, whether you should answer or not, but the story about the South China Sea and the history between the Philippines and China is quite controversial, because what we understand is that the Chinese people were trained to from early in their lives that there's a 9-dash line, and that the South China Sea is a part of China. So you mentioned about quick reaction time in social media to counter the effects of all these posts and everything. But in this case, it has been around for years. I can't really say for centuries. It has been around for years. how do you actually counteract this? And do you have any advice for the Philippines?
So the good thing about being a digital minister is that this is one of the topics I can say that has really no digital purview, and I have no prior experience about it. So I'm sorry, but I don't have much to consult. The only time I've been consulted on anything like that is on how to do sustainable fishery. In the fishing rights and making sure that we hit our IUU targets. And I think that's probably not what you're asking. And so aside from the fishing and the scientific collaboration on climate science, I really don't have any prior experience to the South Sea issue. So sorry about that. I don't have an answer, nor do I have a slide for that.
Unfortunately.
Albert, do you have another question?
I was hoping you still had a slide.
Albert, do you have another question?
No, not I can think of. Thank you.
Okay, for now. I have a couple of questions. Then we'll go back to questioners as they type in their questions. You talked earlier about democracy being a technology, and everything that we create here is a technology and it's perfectible, I guess. And many of us try to do that. There's another technology that seems to be competing with democracy technology right now. Why is that technology, in some places at least, or in many places, why does that technology seem to be winning?
Well, it's not winning. I mean, Taiwan obviously is losing very rapidly. And I believe you were referring to authoritarianism.
Yes.
And I think when we use the words like transparency, right? I began by saying radical transparency. The thing is that the language itself is malleable, right? So when we talk about radical transparency, we're saying that we're making the state radically transparent to citizens. But when PRC says transparency, they mean they make the citizens radically transparent to the state. And so it's both the same word. Essentially, you can use very similar underpinning technologies, but on the other hand, the social value is diametrically opposed, right? So, or when we say co-creation, right, it means that you get to break the law from the private sector for a while, for half a year, proving your new regulation to the society. That's called sandboxes. But then for the Dang, for the CCP, that's the other way around, is that the party, the state, get to co-create your business goals with your large enterprises. And again, the same words, but very different meanings. And so I don't think anything is particularly winning, though. I would say that it's both amplified. So digital can amplify both authoritarianism, and it can also amplify democracy. What's important here is the social norm around which people are willing to go to, for example, social sanction for. So when we did, for example, publish the radically transparent political contributions, that was very controversial, and we fought for years for it, which is the expenditure and the donation always only coming from domestic sources of all the political and business into the, for example, legislative candidates. Because of our call, the control branch, that's a separate branch in the government, finally published in 2018, like the entire raw data. So the investigative journalists have plenty to work with. And at the same time, though, because this pushes the social norm a little bit, we would then be able to look at the expenditure report and saw that many mayoral candidates or city councilors at the time were not reporting the social media advertisements because they were not classifying it as political contributions. Maybe it just went straight into the pocket of, I'll just say it, Facebook. And so I'll just talk to Facebook at the time in 2019, last year, and saying, look, we have a social norm here. All our political contribution must come from domestic sources. And this is social norm. So you either work with the social norm, which means treating each and every advertisements as campaign donation. It can only look at sources and you target criteria in real time, just like our control your norms, and ban foreign sponsored ones, or you just stop running political advertisements altogether during our election, your call. And there was no law that we passed because of it. It was just the threat of social sanction from the independent journalists, from the pro-democracy groups. It's not even a government thing. So we did not use state power, but Facebook relented. We become the first jurisdiction in which they published the entire ads library in real time. And Twitter and Google simply refused to run political advertisements. So to me, that's democracy winning over the really ambiguously democratic multinational companies back then. Of course, nowadays, Facebook in their testimony is now totally pro-democracy. But that was, I would like to think, because they get inspired by the Taiwanese norms.
There's a question from Victor and a question from Sam. Victor, I'll go to Sam first because it's a bit more connected to this, and then we'll go to Victor. And I'll ask our audience, we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions after that. Please type it in now so we can be sure to ask you. Sam first. Sam?
Thanks, Coco. Audrey, what you're describing is a pretty radical role in terms of the way in which you work and the way in which you work within government. Is that down to you and your expertise and where you've come from and the way in which you work, or was that role created? Was there an intention to have a digital minister role, and is it part of a broader strategy and a vision of how to govern? And second part of it is, where did the resistance come from? Because these changes don't happen without some pushback. And you just mentioned one of the struggles there in terms of information around campaign finance, but I'm imagining that must have been similar in lots of the other things you've been trying to do.
Yeah, great question. The second one is easy. We are the resistance. You're looking at the resistance. We're literally the resistance. We occupy the parliament. And so when we occupied the parliament in 2014, there was an intentional demonstration showing the entire society that with 500,000 people on the street, it is possible to get rough consensus if you just design your deliberation spaces right. And so I think the theory of change, I happen to have a slide for that, of my position, it was a deliberative one. And the one thing is basically saying, instead of playing zero-sum games, like between, I don't know, economy and environment, or between, say, innovation and social justice, right? The list goes on. Instead of doing, battle days of, principal agent problem, proxy consultations, we will just have broadband as human rights, empower people to speak for themselves, and instead of working for the people, work with the people, and eventually after the people. And so that's why we emphasize the idea on getting people's feelings checked, because only with common feelings can the social sector and the business sector work toward common goals instead of against each other. And so I guess the larger plan is just the sustainable development goals, the global goals. And I always picture the goals in my mind as this Venn diagram, where we, the people working on digital spaces, are right in the middle. That's partnership for the common goals, and specifically making sure that people can rely on each other's data, and that effective partnerships can grow because of that, and that we're happy to share our open innovation. And so long story short, that was intentional, and it's in my job description. So I'll just read my job description very quickly, which is kind of a poetic version of those global goals. It goes like this. Instead of Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear the singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here. So that's my job description.
Thanks very much, Audrey. Since you're talking about your job, we call you digital minister. Could you tell the group here what's your full title?
Okay, my full title is board member, Radical Exchange Foundation, New York. Board member, Digital Future Society, Barcelona. Board member, Council Democracy Foundation, Amsterdam. And that's my real job. Now my day job is the minister with our portfolio in charge of the public digital innovation space for social innovation, open government, and youth engagement.
So thank you very much for shortening it to digital minister, because there's no way we'll get through that. Sam, do you have a follow-up question before I go to Victor?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam. Victor? Victor, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, very high-minded. I know. The can you move here? No. If there's anybody you know in the Philippines, let us know who thinks along your lines. I think that would be great. But my other question, I guess, is again the matter at hand. Any you know, we struggle with COVID, as you know. It seems that we had a health event with your health officials. I don't remember their names exactly. And my takeaway from that is that two big things really is you don't test asymptomatics, but you're super focused on tracing and isolation. We have probably overemphasized testing. We're using less than half of rated test capacity, and still we talk about testing. But the problem is really tracing. And right now it takes 8 days from test to the start of trace, and you know the tracing is very difficult because of the like I said, there's no public databases, or they're not easily accessed at the very least. And second is that we have 95% of SIM cards are anonymous. Any suggestions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a slide for that. So, and here, I think, I don't know whether you've heard already our medical officer's brief about the digital fence, but really that's our main thing, that is to say quarantine at the borders. And quarantine at the borders is, I think, the most important thing, really, that we have done. And it involves like tens of thousands of people placed in home quarantine, and we pay them a stipend of $33 a day for working with the quarantine. But if they break out of the quarantine, they pay us back 1,000 times that, so that they can fund 1,000 more people, I'm sure. But right, so people don't break out of quarantine period. I mean, we don't have so many hotels for quarantining 14 days. And even after 14 days, people are required to wear medical masks for another 7 days. And so it's really very strict. And the reason why people choose to stay at home is because they're more familiar with their home, of course, but we only do so if they have a large enough home to have their own bathroom, essentially. And the home quarantine relies on this SMS system that we already had in place before the pandemic to warn people of early like flood warning or earthquake warnings that would arrive a few seconds or 10 seconds before the earthquake hits. So people are already very well known about the idea that your phone will be triangulated based on the cell phone tower strength. Again, because the broadband is a human right. Anywhere in Taiwan, you have 3 nearby cell phone towers. And so they can know, like within 50-meter or so radius, where your phone is. And so if you break out of that perimeter, again, a automated SMS is sent to the health bureau and neighborhood managers, who will then check what happened to you. Maybe your phone runs out of battery or things like that. And so the great thing about this system is that it doesn't require anything about a named SIM card or anything about a app or anything about GPS. All you need to do is to associate a person under quarantine into any SIM number or IMEI number that they happen to carry with them. And you can get that number from participating telecoms. And so this is, of course, like hurts the privacy, but it has a clear delineation, like just for 14 days. And we cannot store those identifiers anymore after the 14 days, after they get out of the quarantine. But I think that's the single most important thing. Well, next to soap. Soap is the most important thing. But after soap, I think quarantining at the borders is really the main thing that gets the Taiwan model going early enough.
Is this open source so that Ron Host can adapt it to the Philippines?
Well, the thing is that it's more like open algorithm because we designed this system reusing the early disaster warning system. And so each telecom, the 5 participating telecoms, have to implement it for their own system, right? So it's, I think for any telecom that has like cell broadcasting capabilities. This only takes them a few days to implement. What's important is that you have to get all the telecoms on board. That was the difficult part.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Before I ask the last question, could I invite everyone to share your comments or your feedback via Microsoft Forms, which you can get by aiming your camera phone at the QR code flashed on your screen right now. Please note, we may use your comments in our publications. And for our last question, Audrey, your former president, Lee Dong-wei, passed away over the weekend. He's considered the founder of your democracy. And as you were telling us earlier, he was known for starting something called, I think, I forget the exact word, but it's helping others or helping other countries.
Yeah, Taiwan can help. Yes.
Taiwan can help. How exportable is the Taiwanese brand of democracy, especially the Taiwanese brand of digital democracy at this time, do you think?
I have a slide for that too.
Of course you do.
Okay. Right. So yeah, when we say Taiwan can help, we mean not only on COVID prevention, which is SDG 3, or on open government, which is SDG 16, or on cross-sectoral collaboration, which is SDG 17. We mean each and every sustainable development goals, and we're happy to help. On Twitter, you can use hashtag Taiwan can help to see how exactly we can help, and there's also Taiwan can help us that talks about how we helped other jurisdictions around the world, really. But the model that you described, and I have this little haiku of sorts that describes my kind of vision of Taiwan, and it goes like this: it's swirly ocean, beautiful islands, is a transcultural republic of citizens. And that's ROC. And the Republic of Citizens, as imagined by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, is not just a republic, but a directly democratic republic. And you can see that with presidential hackathon, with sandboxes, referenda, and things like that. People don't see democracy as just something that they participate every 4 years or every 2 years, uploading 3 bits every 4 years. That's called voting. But rather, they can participate day to day. Just pick up their phone and call 1922, or start a petition on join.gov.tw, or join one of the sandbox experiments, or just tour around Taiwan on the social innovation tour, and things like that. But the key word here is transcultural. Because in Taiwan, we face earthquake all the time, where on one side, the Eurasian plate, the other side, the Philippine sea plate. And these two plates, break and crash into each other all the time, so that not only our buildings are resilient, our ideas must be resilient as well. And so you have people arguing passionately about GDPR, the human right, a little bit technophobic, like keeping the data collection away and things like that. But people arguing for extracting the value of data like oil, a very American perspective. And also people arguing from an authoritarian perspective, like the state should know everything about everybody and so on. And what we do is that we innovate by listening to all the sides, taking all the sides, and then innovate like we innovated on marriage equality, by legalizing only the bylaw relationship, the rights and duties, but not the in-law relationship. So when two same-sex individuals wed, they wed, but their families don't. And that's how we get both generations to support marriage equality. And so this very eclectic transcultural way of going about democracy is, to me, the value of Taiwan model. And that's why the tip of Taiwan de Savillon rises toward the sky, literally every year by 2.5 centimeters. And that is also something that's not left wing, not right wing, but up wing.
Wow, what a way to end. Audrey, thank you very much for those words. Before we go to the closing, I'd just like to acknowledge the Canadian Ambassador, Peter MacArthur, is here. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today. And at this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Stefan Joost. He's the country director of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, our partner today, for his closing remarks. Stefan? Dr. Joost?
Yep, you can see and hear me?
We can hear you. We can see you now.
Thank you very much, Coco. The Makati Business Group and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, with our Global Freedom and Democracy series, we want to analyze and discuss key challenges and threats for our democratic systems. And without any doubt, the use and abuse of modern technologies is one of the key issues for our democracies. I remember in my advantage age when the new technologies came up, we had a lot of expectations, hopes, visions. Meanwhile, some of them perhaps are illusions or fears. But to mention only some points, open data, e-government, or opening new dimensions for the earlier installed Free Information Acts. So the hope was to democratize democracy. And Audrey Tang pointed out how broad this subject area is, could be, or should be. But on the other hand, every day we become more aware of the two sides of the one coin of the modern technologies. Meanwhile, the question is of part of the social medias of these new technologies could be turned out in a profound danger for democracies. And there is no doubt that liberal democracies face within their own system these challenges. But since some years, the danger is coming also from outside, from authoritarian, illiberal countries and governments. And liberal democracies are under cyber attack, not only directed to economic areas, but more and more in order to influence political decisions, national elections included. And this brings with it that we have to deal with two challenges. On the one hand, to modernize, digitalize more our infrastructure in all areas, to improve the performance of our democracy and the performance of governments. And I think with certainty, COVID-19 will be a worldwide accelerator of this development in all countries. Doesn't matter in which kind of status there are meanwhile. And Audrey Tang, this was very interesting and as Coco said, funny too, highlighted how it can be done, even with humor in very different areas. And on the other hand, we have to defend our liberal democracies, our political system, our values and liberties against technological-based attacks. So to sum up, I think an excellent start of the series Global Freedom and Democracy. My gratitude to MBC, Coco Alguas, and the staff, my staff of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and very especially to Minister Audrey Tang. And
did we lose Dr. Joost? Okay, in case we've lost Dr. Joost, I'm going to close us slowly. Thanks very much for that. I'd like to thank Audrey again and all of the people who attended, all the people who asked questions. I'd like to thank my team, especially Genevieve and Katch and Tricia. Genevieve who helped me with the questions today, and Dr. Joost's team at Konrad Adenauer Foundation. We hope to see all of you again in our future events, including the two next sessions of Freedom and Democracy. The next one next week is with Larry Diamond of Stanford, and Emily Lau follows that the week after. She's the former chairperson of the Democratic Party in Hong Kong. Please join us for those. Audrey, thank you very much again. We hope to see you either virtually like this or physically in the Philippines one day.
We offer dual citizenship and Taiwan Gold Card. But anyway, thank you for the great questions, and live long and prosper.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Everyone, thank you and stay safe. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Victor, thank you. Sam, thank you. Paco, everybody who attended, thank you very much.